Welcome to the K95.3 Sports Show podcast. My name is Beau Standfuss. I will be your host. If you like what you hear today, please hit the subscribe button down below so you can get all future updates when we release new episodes. We will be releasing them every Wednesday, starting with August 29th. So please hit subscribe if you like what you hear. Also today, what we will be doing for the preview is we'll be talking to Sheldon, Rob Ryan, Dean Rivers, and Stephen Ray, all four announcers here at KDJS and K95, and asking them to give us their Mount Rushmore of Vikings players. Look through a history of the Vikings and pick out only 4 players that you can put up on the Mount Rushmore of Vikings players. If you guys want to help out and join in, please comment below on the YouTube channel who your 4 Mount Rushmore favorites would be. Who are your 4 Vikings players that you would want on Mount Rushmore? So let's get it started here. I brought Mr. Rob Ryan in here. He's got his very large notebook.
All I need is on a Post-it note, and I've got it covered.
So, yes, Rob, as I asked you last week, we're coming in and we're talking about who you would put on as your Mount Rushmore of Vikings players. So go ahead, list me your people, but then give a short explanation on why you feel that that certain person should be on there.
Okay, you tell me if any of these surprise you.
I definitely will.
Okay?
I definitely will.
Chris Carter.
Okay.
John Randall.
Okay.
Alan Page.
Okay.
Paul Krause.
Paul Krause. Okay. There are names that are left off that I am surprised.
Because everyone else is going to say those names. I just wanted to be different, and these guys, I've got to fight for each one of them.
Okay. Well, let's see. Chris Carter, I think it's...
Chris Carter, I think a lot of people say Randy Moss was the best receiver. Overall, Chris Carter was the best receiver the Vikings have ever had because he mentored players. Moss did not. Chris Carter had more, I think, heart. Randy Moss had pure raw talent. Chris Carter was the closest thing we had to San Francisco 40 Jerry Rice, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Anyway. Very similar players.
And plus, it's what he gave back to the team. Not only what he did for the team, but what he gave back, what he meant to the team as well. That's my fight for Chris Carter.
I agree with a lot of that.
Okay. John Randall, domination. Do I need to say anything more? Domination. Was he ever not double-teamed?
Yes.
You know?
Nonstop motor.
Because even when he had what a lot of people thought was a bad game, because of that, somebody else had a good game.
Exactly.
You know, and plus what he meant to the team. Attitude, huge. Huge. Chris Carter, same thing. Attitude, huge.
Yep.
You know?
No, I like it.
Alan Page, seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
Undersized. Even for the time, he was not that big, but you show me another guy with more heart. You know, intelligent person, intelligent human being, not only a football player, but just intelligence.
Yep.
I've had the honor of meeting him a couple of times.
Nice.
And that guy's got some messed up hands. Man.
I think that's almost kind of a rite of passage for all, you know, especially those 70s players, 60s and 70s. They can point around corners quite easily without having to bend a finger.
And if there was one Vikings player above all players that have ever put on the purple, for kids to look up to, I'd say it's Alan Page.
I agree. For what he did after football.
Absolutely.
100% agree.
And what he did during football.
Oh, yeah.
This guy was going classes, and this guy was just grueling what he was doing and playing at that level.
Yep. No, I agree.
Paul Krause, that one was probably the one that raised the most eyebrows.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Paul Krause, dominating safety, 81 interceptions, record. Interception in the Super Bowl. A fumble recovery in the Super Bowl. Only missed 2 games in 16 seasons. 8 of those seasons were Pro Bowl seasons. Because of a great safety like Paul Krause, it made our Purple People Eaters up front a lot better.
That is true. That is true.
You know,
and I think a lot of people do forget about Krause being the all-time interceptions leader. It's one of those. It shouldn't be a forgotten stat, but it is. It glazes over all the time, and it's stood for years and years and years. So I mean, I can understand why Paul Krause is on there.
I put him on there because he's so unsung.
Yeah, and I like that too. I agree.
I mean, I could have put Eller on there. That whole line. Yeah. But forget about Paul Krause. If you've got good we know this. If you have good secondary coverage, your line looks a lot better.
Yes, yes, exactly. It gives them that extra half a second to a second to get to the quarterback. Right. Those near misses all of a sudden become sacks. Yeah, it does make a huge difference. I agree with 2 out of your 4.
Okay.
I agree with Carter, and I agree with Page.
Not John Randall.
John Randall is I'm going to bring this probably up to everybody, but John Randall, we were talking about Mount Rushmore. So you go out there, there's Mount Rushmore, there's the 4 faces. And a ways down the road, there's Crazy Horse.
Yeah.
He's Crazy Horse. He is not only because I feel like he's fine up there too, but I mean, on the field he was crazy.
He was crazy. Yeah.
And so he was a very close one for me. What I did with my other 2 was Tarkenton. I mean, you have to put the best quarterback in franchise history on there, leading us to the 3 Super Bowls. The records that he held when he retired from the game, big difference. That's a big selling point for me. And my 4th person is I have Moss on there, just because. And I agree with you, like you said, Moss is the most talented wide receiver ever. I feel he's the most talented wide receiver ever. Not necessarily, and possibly you could make arguments for the best. But what, like you said, with Chris Carter, what I liked about Chris Carter was no matter who was throwing to him. I mean, he had a different quarterback every year in the 90s.
Think of how many receivers that Chris Carter helped. Think about how many Vikings receivers he helped.
Yeah, great mentor.
He was a great mentor. He was well liked. That's why I didn't pick Fran Tarkenton.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just saying.
He was well liked.
I'm just saying.
Jab.
Well, I mean, I'm not taking away from his pure raw talent.
Oh yeah.
In today's game, Fran Tarkenton would not have the career that he had.
Yeah,
he would have been whistled dead so many times.
Yeah.
And what he could do was amazing because of a pretty good offensive line too.
Yep.
But there's to limit it to 4.
Oh, it's difficult.
It's very difficult.
So I'm excited to see who the other 3 are going to come in.
So see, I kind of went all over the place.
Yeah,
a little defense, a little new, a little older. A little bit, because. I just didn't want to give the Carl Eller and the Alan Page and the Tarkenton the same old.
You don't want to show your age.
Yeah. I got spoiled in high school. We were in 3 Super Bowls when I was in high school. And so, if they don't get it in the next 2 years.
The window's here.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to see one.
Yeah.
I'm running out of time, Vikings. Not to put pressure on you or anything, but.
I hear you. Well, I have no overall arguments with any of the 4 you gave. They're all solid ones. I have no problem with them, and that's what's great about this debate, is there's really no wrong answers.
No,
but it's fun to hear why you chose Krause and Randall over Tarkenton. And Moss and stuff like that that I had on mine.
And you realize only one of mine was one of these, what do they call them, key player, or the running backs, quarterbacks, receivers, the
position, yeah.
The ones that get the raw.
Yeah.
Players, because you can have a great running back in the backfield, but if you don't have a good offensive line, you're not doing anything. And same way with quarterback or what, it's all dependent on the others. So I like to kind of hail the guys that don't get enough attention too.
No.
There were a couple offensive linemen I could have put on there as well, long-term offensive linemen.
And I agree with that. It's hard, exactly, when you have the skilled position players. That's the word you're looking for. I caught it. I finally figured it out. I know it's so hard. You think of defensive line because the Purple People Eaters and the Vikings have had some of the best defensive linemen of all time on their team. So, but yeah, offensive line, it's just so hard to.
It really is.
It's so hard to be like, hey, this is a great left tackle. It's like, well, yeah. He's the meats and potato guy, but it's like, no, I want the rah-rah, exactly like you said.
Remember, we had that great offensive line that got dispersed. I couldn't even tell you the players, but they were a long-term offensive line a few years ago.
Yeah.
Chris Dolman. Crossed my mind. There's
one.
another dominating, defensive player. So, to get it down to 4 is tough, but it's a discussion.
Well, I like your 4.
Okay,
I like it. I like the love to Kraus. That's kind of a key one for me, but that's a good one.
There you go.
I like that. So
Purple People Eaters may not have been in without him.
That's very true. That's very true. But awesome. Well, thanks for your Mount Rushmore, Rob. I appreciate it, and we'll be hopefully hearing from Rob throughout the podcast. He is more than welcome to come in anytime and give some kind of knowledge if he's got some. And
you can tell my attitude upon how the season is going.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I don't see more than 3 losses. I really don't. But I've said that a few years.
It's going to be interesting. I'm excited. I think I thought the offense was going to take a little while to get going, but then that first drive, the preseason. By the way, we're recording this after the first preseason game. That one's was too nice. It was just like, maybe
it's a difference of having a franchise quarterback.
Yes,
there's the difference.
Exactly.
There's a difference.
A guy who can zip it.
You bet.
An arm.
I think we're up there with the dude over in Green Bay, and
what's her name?
Yeah, what's her name? I don't know. and the guy down in New Orleans and the guy in New England. I think we're right there, and we got the Patriots on the schedule. I don't think they're unbeatable for the Vikings this year at all.
No,
I really don't.
No, it's. I'm excited.
Yes.
Very excited.
Skull.
Thanks again, Rob. Appreciate it. All right, and that was Rob Ryan with his Mount Rushmore. I brought L. Sheldon, the one, the only L. Sheldon, into the booth here to talk his Mount Rushmore of Vikings players. How are you doing today, Al?
I am just as peachy as a keen can be. How does that sound?
That sounds good.
All right.
So you had some time to think about this with the Mount Rushmore. Who are your 4 players? Tell me who they are. Tell me why you picked them.
They have to be 4, huh?
Yes. It's kind of the definition of Mount Rushmore.
My Mount Rushmore might be more like the Rocky Mountains when it comes to the Vikings, but I can pick 4 if I have to. Number 1, I go with legendary coach Bud Grant.
Okay.
Because he looks good in stone. He's kind of a stone-faced guy in the sidelines.
Yes.
A great coach, a great mind, a fellow who still does a lot of wonderful things here in Minnesota with his Bud Grant garage sales that he has.
Yes.
Raises money and everything. People love it. And
he is an icon.
Pretty cool deal. Bud Grant would be one of my 4 guys. Another guy would be John Randall.
John Randall.
Anybody else pick John Randall?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Rob did actually.
The reason I picked John Randall, number 1, great player, tremendous motor, and he used to order pizza from Papa's Pizza in Spicer. That's why. And my stepdaughter and her friends used to deliver pizza to his Green Lake home. I'm not sure if he still has that or not. Mm-hmm. But he would come into the restaurant, and you just couldn't miss John. He's one of the bigger guys in there.
Yep. No, I worked back in that's what's cool about him marrying a local person.
Right.
I worked at the meat department in Cashwise eons ago, and I'm up there, cutting meat, and there he is walking by, and I'm just like, hey, John. And he just waves back. I'm not one of those guys that are going to rush up to him and be like, oh, can you sign my autograph? Can you give me an autograph? Even though I wanted to.
John, sign the T-bone.
Yeah.
He goes, no, man, I'm more like a New York strip guy.
There you go.
Ground beef, forget about it.
Yeah.
So there's my number 2 guy, John Randall.
Yes.
All right. Number 3, Carl Eller. Going with the D-line again, a little more old school. I've had the opportunity to meet Carl on at least 2 occasions, one locally in Wilbur. He autographed an old K95 T-shirt. He, along with Chuck Foreman, whom I thought about putting on the list, but then again, we're throwing darts here. Carl Eller, I went to school for 6 weeks with Carl Eller.
Yeah?
Brown Institute of Radio and Electronics.
Oh, okay.
And he was in the TV course. And I was in the radio program, and we'd meet in the hallway, and everybody's like, hey, Carl, he's a big dude,
Yeah.
It was 1973, 74. So he's in A1 shape.
Yeah.
And he would sit in the TV room, and we'd go by the doors, and we could see through the window, and I could hit it's Carl, you know. Yeah. Carl's a big man, and he's sitting in his desk, and we're like, you could hardly see the desk.
Yeah.
You know? He's a great player, too, obviously. If I remember right, he was number 81.
Yes.
I remember
he's
Carl Eller.
He's a great D lineman.
My last guy, I'm sure he's on other people's lists also. And I'm going to give you my name for him, and you guess who he is. Moonman. Moonman.
Oh, Moss.
Randy Moss.
Yes, the classic Green Bay moon.
Yes, the moon in Cheeseland. It was a cheesy moon. But he burned up the Packers more than once, and he burned up the Cowboys. Remember that Thanksgiving Day game, was it?
Yep.
And he's in the Hall of Fame. He took a career. He was so dang talented. Had a little growing up to do. He did. Great guy as far as a commentator now.
He does a great job. Yeah, he does a great job at that.
And could that guy catch the ball and run? I just love watching Randy Moss. When we had him and was it Culpepper throwing in the passes?
It was just
and
it was
him and
beautiful.
Chris Carter, you know, and even was Jake Reed still with him then? Or?
Yeah, Jake Reed was part of the first few years. They have that 3 deep. You ever see the 3 deep poster? Yeah, I still got mine in my basement at home. So that bad boy's 20 years old, and that's still hanging proud in my basement.
Pristine condition, I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's my 4 guys, and there are so many more. I mean, gosh.
Well, there's a quick question then. If we just did players and you took Bud Grant off, who would you replace Bud Grant with then? If you had to,
probably. That's a toss-up. I'd have to go running back, either Foreman or Peterson.
Okay.
I could throw a quarterback. Fran Tarkenton was great. Led us to Super Bowls.
Yep.
Wonderful player. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Seriously, I'd put about 5 or 6 names on a board, then throw a dart.
Yeah.
Anyone would be fine. Anyone is good, you know. So,
and that's what I like about this conversation because, there's been 3 of us so far: me, Rob, and you, and we've had a couple in common, but not very many. Mine, Tarkington, Page, Moss, Carter. Those are my 4. Tarkington because of the 3 Super Bowls, bringing us to the 3 Super Bowls, all the records he had. Page because of him being one of the 2 defensive players to ever win NFL MVP, and just because he was just a stalwart. Moss, like you said, arguably the most talented wide receiver of all time, and just what he did to the league. He changed the league. He made it for Kelvin Johnson and Julio Jones to come out. I mean, they looked at him and said, "Hey, I want to be Randy Moss." And so that's what's it. And then Carter. Yeah. I mean, Carter's just constant professional and just being able to do what he did through the 90s, having a different quarterback every year. It just amazing. But like I said, yours are
sideline toes in catches by Chris Carter.
Exactly.
I see him all the time making that catch in my visions, you know.
Yep.
And
automatic.
Yeah, Randy Moss and Jerry Rice and the man I affectionately call 2 would be the 3 receivers I think are some of the best in the NFL.
Yeah.
I don't know why 2 was not at the induction ceremony. I think he's kind of a dork for not going. Yeah, 2 is Terrell Owens. T.O. 2.
At first I was kind of like, huh? But then you mentioned the going into the hall, and I was like, okay, he's talking about T.O. Yeah. He's the Moss had his divaness, if that's even a word, but T.O. took that to another level. He seemed to have taken it to another level, and he continues to take it to another level. But yeah, no, that's just. Like I said, that's what I like about the Mount Rushmore. It's going to be, I'm going to be bringing in Dean here soon, and I'll be bringing in Steve, and it'll be interesting to see what they come up. It'll be interesting to see if us 5 have one person in common.
You know, I could have easily I picked half of mine on a personal level, having met them.
Yep.
And I easily could have picked Alan Page in that same category. Long before you were here, hanging out at the Radio Shack, as we call it, the radio building, Alan Page was here and did some interviews with us and chatted, and this was on the verge of him just getting the Supreme Court justice.
Okay, just before he did.
And he was here to talk about that.
Oh, nice.
And do some interviews and sit down. And I'll always remember Alan Page's hands. You want to talk about gnarled up fingers? They went every direction. It looked like a tree that had been hit by lightning. They were just gnarly. These guys that play football, they go through a lot of physical stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's I do. It is fun. It is funny to look at those I mean, probably not for them because their hands are messed up, but it's funny for us to look at them and just see how their fingers are. Especially the D linemen.
Here's another one I could throw at you that I thought about. Matt Blair.
Yep.
You remember Matt Blair?
Mm-hmm.
I watched him play in college at Iowa State.
Okay.
And you knew he had something going on then. He would block and kicks back then.
Nice.
Great linebacker. Big 8 conference before it became the Big 12. A great Viking. Great linebacker. Kick blocker. We had Matt in the middle.
Yeah.
We knew we had a chance to have them not score points.
Yeah.
Just because of him,
Yeah. He increased that percentage.
Yeah. Another good guy. And everybody's got guys like that.
Yep.
And like I say, I tend to lead mine toward a personal level. I met this guy, I met that guy. I watched him in college 300 miles away or whatever the case may be,
Yep.
So yeah, there's my guys anyway. And you go to any of the games this year?
Yeah. My father and I, we usually make it down to one. We haven't made a choice yet on which one we're going to do yet.
My neighbors are taking in the Jacksonville game, the preseason game. I don't know when this is airing, by the way, but they either are going or they have gone.
Yeah.
In that aspect. I don't know if we're going to make a regular season game. We were at the Detroit game 2 years ago when we lost a close one. That was 2 years ago when Detroit beat us twice.
Yeah.
Went into overtime. We should have won the game. We had the ball, and we goofed up our time clock management. I hate thinking about that. Yeah. We went to 2 games at TCF Bank.
Oh, yep.
Which was fun, back-to-back years. The one was one of the coldest days in Viking history against Carolina. Cam Newton doesn't like cold weather.
Yeah, I remember we dominated
lit him up.
We dominated in that game. I remember that.
And then we went to a Bears game the year after that. Virtually the same seats right near the goal line, corner, lower level, but up high enough to see. Really enjoyable seats. TCF Bank, a little more intimate of a stadium, obviously, than U.S. Bank as far as being smaller. Not much sideline space. It was fun to watch the crews work the sideline from TV to officials to whomever.
Yeah.
And one thing I could ask you is, why do they call them cheerleaders? They're dancers.
Yeah.
they don't cheer, they dance.
Exactly. Yeah.
We all get to cheer because they're dancing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're not doing the traditional, rah-rah.
It's this boom bah.
Yeah. Having the crowd talk back to them and going back and forth. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it should almost. I think technically now, don't they call them the street team? The
Could
dance
be,
street.
yeah.
Maybe I see that.
I'm not positive, but
yeah, I think. But yeah, I don't know. But I know exactly. It's they're cheerleader, street team, dancers. Well, awesome. I like your 4. I like how you do the personal side to it. You had some cool stories about knowing them and meeting some of them. So I mean that's what makes football even better, especially in a smaller town like this. You don't see the professional football players walking around. So the fact that John Randall married a local person, the fact that Carl Eller came out and Paige came out, and you had those personal experiences with them.
And a lot of people have had that happen, which is really cool.
Yep.
It's always fun, and the big guys are. Deep down, they're just people.
Exactly. Exactly.
They're just guys, and you hope they have a great afterlife, as I call it, meaning after football.
Yes, exactly. Well, awesome. I'm excited to hear what the next couple guys are going to say and see if we what similarities we have between the 5 of us.
I'll look forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks, Al. Appreciate it. All right. Well, that was Al Sheldon and his choice for his Mount Rushmore. I walked into the KDJS AM studios and I nabbed Dean Rivers to come in here, the voice of RCW Sports.
Whoop, whoop. Go Jags!
Yes. So he is here to give his input on the Mount Rushmore of players. Give me your 4 and give me the reasons, and then I'll go back with you.
Sounds good. Well, I start with it's a quarterbacks league, you could say, and even back in the day, quarterbacks played a huge role, and it's hard to argue Fran Tarkenton being number 1 on my list. Helped lead the team to 3 Super Bowls, all-time leading passer for the Vikings. 13 years he spent with Minnesota, and I should also say that was kind of my guideline. These players had to spend at least 10 years of their career with the team.
Yes.
So that people listening automatically know who I've eliminated at this point.
Yeah, that's a limited lot.
But, you know, I mean, 33,000 plus passing yards in an era that wasn't supposed to be a passing league yet. 266 touchdowns. He also ran for, this is what I didn't know, he ran for 2,500 yards.
Oh, yeah.
Back at a time where quarterbacks really didn't run. 22 scores there, 5-time Pro Bowler, 13 years with the team. Fran's number 1 on the list. Number 2 I have on the list is John Randall. You know, an undersized defensive tackle, but could pass rush and stop the run at 290 pounds and only stood 6'1". One of the best motors of any defensive players to play the game. You gotta love the face paint. I wish they would bring that back in football.
Well,
you know, the old war paint thing.
And he was the reason why they stopped it.
I know, kind of sad.
Yeah.
But John Randall's my number 2. 11 years with the Vikings. He ended up finishing out with Seattle there at the end, but 6-time straight Pro Bowler and first-team All-Pro 6 straight years. He had 8 straight seasons with 10 or more sacks for the Vikings. Yeah, 114 total with the team. John Randall is my number 2. And then I've got the other side, as far as line goes, Randall McDaniel. And there's a little bit of a bias here, but I've got some stats to back it up, too. Later in his career, he became a teacher. And he actually, not anymore, but for, I want to say, a 5-year stretch, he went to teach at my elementary school that I grew up going to in Mound, Minnesota. So I guess you could say there's a little bias there, but
when you listen back, you'll hear Al did that too. He did some personal stories.
Oh yeah, you know,
it makes it stand out and helps you remember them and get that personal level.
Exactly. He spent 12 years with the Vikings. Started in '88, and here's my stretch where he makes it for me. At left guard, one of the best left guards to play the game. There's a reason why he's a Hall of Famer. But from 1990 to 1999, he started in 160 straight games at left guard on the line, at a position where guys get beat up all the time, and you always wonder every year, okay, if this guy goes down, we're in trouble. 9 straight seasons to start that many games at left guard. That's impressive. He's my number 3.
What I'll always remember about Randall McDaniel too is how he, can't remember which leg it was his left or right leg he injured. And then so he had to change his stance.
Yes, he changed it up. Yeah,
and it was odd because every game the announcers had to mention it. They had to point it out and be like, "Well, if you take a look at Randall McDaniel, you know, after his injury, he changed and they'll circle his leg." And it was he had it weirdly placed, but it didn't skip a beat.
No,
didn't skip a beat.
Yeah, that's a warrior finding a way to adjust and still play at a high level.
Yep.
Randall McDaniel, number 3, and number 4, Chris Carter. You know, when he first came into the league, and he does a lot of stuff now for new players coming into the league, and Randy Moss does too now that he's matured.
Yeah.
cricket.
Matured for Moss.
Exactly. You know, just helping new guys come in. Like, look, these are the things that aren't going to get you in trouble. Things like that. He did a lot of stuff for the community when he came into Minnesota, did Chris Carter, and still does to this day in around the Twin Cities area. And I see him come out and do something out here. But still, 12 years with the team, over 1,000 receptions, 12,000 plus yards, 100 plus touchdowns. 9 years, he started every game for 9 straight years as well, and nobody was better at that tiptoe catch down the sideline. You know, for as much as how great Randy Moss was at making those big plays down the field, it was Chris Carter on third down. It just never seemed to fail. That stretch of a decade when we needed a big third down catch between 5 and 8 yards, he always knew exactly where to go, how deep he needed to get in his route to get that first down. There was hardly anybody better than that in the game than Chris Carter.
Yep. No,
those are my 4.
I like it. It's so far between the 3 announcers, there is one common name.
Chris Carter.
No.
Fran?
No. John Randall, which is
interesting.
Which I'm not surprised about because I'm a huge John Randall fan and he's awesome.
Yep.
I didn't put him on mine. I put Tarkington, Page, Carter, Moss,
Alan Page. It's you could almost say you got to look at the different generations and just take your pick.
Yeah,
you could easily substitute Page with John Randall. Absolutely,
yep.
Absolutely.
And I joked around with Rob. I told him John Randall would probably be my 5th. Now, I mentioned to him, and people who are listening to the podcast are like, all right, Beau, you already talked about this, but I haven't talked to you about it, so I'm going to mention it. He would, you think of Mount Rushmore, there's the 4 faces.
Yep.
Down the road, there's Crazy Horse.
Add a fifth.
That's John Randall. He's crazy. When he went on the field, he was crazy, and he was crazy good and just crazy mentality, getting people's head. So John Randall's is a few miles down.
For me,
with his own little monument.
It would either be Alan Page or Paul Krause. I guess you could say if I were to pick a fifth, it would be one of those two.
Yep. Those are some great ones. Yeah, no, you can't really argue. You made some great points on all of them. Obviously Randall McDaniel, that's the first offensive lineman that's been brought up. And like it's you don't think of the offensive line. They're unsung heroes.
Yes, they are.
Of the football team. But yeah, McDaniel was the best.
Mm-hmm. He was.
He really was. It was. So I do like that. Obviously Carter. I said Moss, Carter and Moss. That's why I put them both on. They're maybe that's just my age and my childhood. You know what I mean? Like
you look at Randy Moss, and he really turned the Vikings franchise into a multi. Red McCombs should give him a huge paycheck because we didn't start selling out the Metrodome until Randy Moss came along.
Red McCombs should have been talked into trading him because of what Moss did to him.
Exactly. When you look at putting butts in the seats and just from a pure excitement standpoint and how he was really one of the first freaks of his kind. Mm-hmm. Transcended that position.
Yep, just super uber talented. Mm-hmm. Uber talented. He paved the roads for the Kelvin Johnsons, the Julio Joneses.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's who they are. So, well, awesome. I have no complaints with your four, and that's like I said. I like the I like the addition of Randall McDaniel on there because that's
can't forget about the line.
Somebody different.
Yep. Those guys wouldn't have that ball down the field if the quarterback didn't have time.
Exactly.
Robert Smith, just those running backs throughout those eras, even before Robert Smith. Randall McDaniel was opening up the holes in the middle.
The 13 different starting quarterbacks for the Vikings in the 90s, which is another reson why Chris Carter should be on the list. Because,
he did it with a lot of different guys.
Exactly. You had Jerry Rice. Yep. He had two Hall of Famers.
Yeah, throwing to him
his entire career almost. Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the end of his career, he was still solid at the end of his career. But for 75% of it, he had arguably two of the best quarterbacks of all time throwing to him.
Yep.
Where it was a flip a coin. And, technically I guess Carter had some good quarterbacks. He had Cunningham, he had Moon, he had Gannon.
Jeff George, who wasn't horrible.
Wade Wilson. Wade Wilson wasn't Wade Wilson, but of course, leave it to the Vikings that like Rich Gannon goes off and wins an MVP after he leaves us. You know what I mean? But
in Oakland of all places,
yeah. The Raiders. Oh my goodness. Well, awesome. I appreciate it, and for you coming in and giving the Mount Rushmore of Viking players for me.
Absolutely.
We got one left. We'll be bringing in Stephen Ray in just a few minutes, and. Thanks again, Dean. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, that was Dean Rivers. Now I've walked and I've grabbed Mr. Stephen Ray, 10-3 guy on K95.
Midday guy. That's me.
Yeah. So, obviously, we're coming in doing Mount Rushmore. You've had some time to think about it. Go ahead. Give me your people. Give me the reasons why you selected them, and then we'll kind of go back and forth.
I've had a couple days to think about it, and it's a tough question. The Mount Rushmore of the Minnesota Vikings, that's, we've been such a legendary, storied team, since the 60s, and it's just there's so many people that you can put on on that list, and it's like I've had to decide who I felt were the best. When I talk about the best, I don't mean like stat-wise, anything like that. I look at the influence that they had on the game, the impact that they left, and just the kind of the overall popularity that they had as a player. So my four are John Randall, Chris Carter, Chuck Foreman, and Fran Tarkenton. John Randall, another guy. I'm kind of a guy that likes to root for the underdog. So yes. John Randall always, they always thought he was too small to play the game. He went undrafted, and this guy ended up being just a monster on the field. Exactly. So many stories like that where all these guys get passed over because they weren't big enough, or they weren't fast enough in the combines. But John Randall was,
and
not
that's what feeds them.
Usually. Yeah, right.
That'll feed the best.
Yeah. So one of the best defensive tackles, if not the best, to play the game. John Randall. And the Vikings, of course, there's a lot of people that are going to say, well, the Vikings have had a lot of defensive players that they would put on Mount Rushmore before that. But for me, it was John Randall just because he was an animal out on the field. To me, he was kind of like a Kevin Green type of player where it's like, this guy's just heckling players nonstop. Painted his face like a warrior. I mean, this guy was a nut job on the field.
There was nobody better to have mic'd up during a game. I mean, I still come across his videos and shorts from when he played, and I have to stop whatever I'm doing and listen to it, and just listen to the craziness of him. And that's
he used to get a jab in at some of these guys that passed him over too. Like, what was one of his favorite sayings was 6-footers for life.
Yeah.
6-footers for life from the side of the sidelines.
And I like in his interviews he talked about how he would do research on the players.
Mm-hmm.
So he would fight, so that he would bring it up during the game, and they'd instantly he said he'd see in their helmets, their eyes would be like, how the hell you know that? That, once again, mind games. I love it.
Yeah, he was perfect for that. He was never, this guy was never silent on the sidelines. He was always jabbering on about something.
Yep.
And I remember watching some of those NFL films from back in the day. Yeah, mic'd up. John Randall, obviously one of the best guys to listen to.
Loved it.
You probably couldn't hear a lot of the stuff he was saying because I'm sure there'd be a lot of bleeps and stuff in there.
Exactly.
But it was, for me, defensively, my Minnesota, it was tough. It was between him. There's a lot of guys that are on top, like Jim Marshall. You got Alan Page, Carl Eller. Then you get into, Henry Thomas, Chris Dolman, stuff like that. Keith Millard was another one I thought about because he was one of my favorites. One of my favorite stories from him, of course, is he took on the police out in Eden Prairie one time, and they had to tase him 4 times just to get the cuffs on, just so they could talk to him and try to calm him down. So, of course, that was probably in like the steroid era.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that wasn't all him.
May have been some alcohol involved as well. So, anyway, moving along, Chris Carter, arguably the best receiver of all time. It's a toss-up. Jerry Rice, obviously,
Yep.
Jerry Rice had the 49ers. He had Montana and Steve Young thrown to him. Yep. Chris Carter, how many quarterbacks did Chris Carter go through in his career?
So Dean and I talked about, because he had Carter on his list, and that's why, that's why I think what makes him up there with Jerry Rice, not only stat-wise, but everything else, is, he didn't have the best players, the best Hall of Fame, arguably 2 of the best quarterbacks of all time throwing to him.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, and a lot of people are going to say, well, that Randy Moss should be up there ahead of Chris Carter. I don't think, in my opinion, Randy Moss would have been anywhere near as good if he hadn't had an opportunity to play with Chris Carter, because I think Randy Moss was kind of a wild card, kind of an outlaw at the time, and I think Chris Carter kind of taught him that, hey, you just
He tried to rein him in as much. You still talk about all the things that Moss still did, but just imagine if Carter wasn't there to rein him in, how his career would have just went off the rails. Possibly.
Yeah. I don't think, of course, Randy just got inducted into the Hall of Fame, and I don't think he'd be there if it weren't for Chris Carter. I really do think that he kind of leveled him out a little bit, told him that it's like you don't just have to be a long ball guy. We're going to teach you how to do this and run. I don't think anybody ran routes better than Chris Carter.
Nope.
Caught more just impossible catches.
The hands, the feet, just oh man. I missed
He had those those hooked pinky fingers too.
Yeah.
They were kind of bent in. It's like they always kind of attributed that to his ability to catch those balls, make those snags. So, but again, influence and impact that Chris Carter left on the game. I think he and Jerry Rice, I think, set the standard for what a receiver should be for the future. And you see a lot of receivers these days that, gosh, they play an awful lot like Jerry and Chris did back in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s. So he's my second pick for the Vikings Mount Rushmore. Third now, another contested kind of pick, I would say Chuck Foreman now.
First time mentioned. but understandable.
Yeah. So actually, to me, it was a toss-up between Robert Smith and Chuck Foreman for me. Adrian, I have trouble putting him up there. Stat-wise, obviously, he's. The guy was a machine.
Stat-wise, talent-wise,
mm-hmm.
I agree. It's like I didn't have AP on it either. If he wouldn't have whipped the hell out of his son, and his career just all of a sudden just off the edge. If he would have continued his progression that he was on,
yeah.
I think arguably he would easily been on that list, but just the way his career ended with us, and just it wasn't quite long enough.
Yeah, and I always thought that Adrian was kind of more of a second half running back too. It seems like he kind of waited, and maybe that could have been the strategy at the time, just kind of waiting for the defense to get tired before they finally start breaking these huge runs and just kind of pounding away at people. Chuck Foreman, first running back, I would say that was a kind of a double threat. He had 73 receptions one season back in the 70s, and that was unheard of back then. And you could bring up an argument that the entire West Coast offense was built off of the way the Vikings used
Jerry
Foreman
Burns.
At the time.
Yep, Jerry Burns. You took the words right out of my mouth. I literally was waiting for you to pause so I could say those exact words.
So, the style of game, the style of the West Coast offense, was built around Chuck Foreman. I do believe that. Yep. So, and getting around to my final pick, not going to say too much about this final pick. A lot of people put Fran Tarkenton up there, and I'm one of them. Vikings have had a lot of just amazing quarterbacks over the years, lots of legendary quarterbacks like Warren Moon, Brad Johnson, Randall Cunningham, just a laundry list of quarterbacks. Yep. Fran Tarkenton's numbers that he put up are still, he's still like in the top 10 to this day in a lot of categories.
When he retired, he was number one in a lot of them. Yeah.
Probably one of the best scrambling quarterbacks of all time. You know,
it's fun watching the old games and just seeing them running around, and you're just kind of like, geez.
So Fran Tarkenton, I think is should be a shoo-in almost for the Vikings Mount Rushmore. But again, there's so many other players that I tossed around.
Well, I'll let you know, out of you four announcers, John Randall is the one that all four of you mentioned.
Really?
That's the only one you guys have in common is John Randall, which doesn't surprise me. I love John. Like I mentioned with Dean, the people listening have heard me talk to Dean about John Randall and Rob about John Randall, and he's probably my fifth. I joke that he's Crazy Horse.
Yeah,
he's just a couple miles down from Mount Rushmore, but he has his own little monument of Crazy Horse because he was a crazy son of a bitch. And
Crazy Horse is it's a fitting name for him.
So and I had the difference. I had Fran Tarkenton too, so we had that in common, and we had Carter in common. The difference is I on defensive line I had Alan Page. I just feel, to me, even though I never watched him play because I was born in 1980, just what I've seen and what I've heard from my dad and from other people that have saw him, he deserves to be up there. I feel for that reason. And in the NFL MVP, him and only Lawrence Taylor are the only two defensive players to win the MVP.
If you look at a stat, defensive tackles all-time sack leaders, John Randall's right behind who?
Exactly.
So
that's I got Alan Page, and then I do have Moss on mine, just because he's the freak.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It's we've had now arguably two of the best all-time wide receivers on our team.
Yeah, and
we were lucky to watch them play together for a handful of years, and just what Randy Moss changed the game.
Right.
You know what I mean? And changed Minnesota Viking sports. We were having trouble selling out games. I remember, before Moss came around, they'd be like, all right, well, GM bought the last 4,000 tickets so they wouldn't be blacked out this weekend. I mean, they would announce that almost every week. Then Randy Moss came. And they're like, well, no need to buy extra tickets because there aren't any for the next 15, 20 years. I mean, he just, what he brought to the team and what he brought to the game was just outstanding. And like I said, and I've mentioned previously, he is, to me, the most talented wide receiver of all time.
Yeah. I would have to say we're just raw talent. Right from scratch, right out of college. Obviously, you can't. There are very few receivers you could put ahead of him for just pure raw talent. It's just and
if he wasn't the diva, if he had the maturity, if he had the work ethic of Chris Carter or Jerry Rice, I think we would be talking as him as the best wide receiver of all time.
Yeah.
No question. I think there'd be no question he would be if he had the work ethic of those two, and he just, he flamed out towards the end, which was too bad. I loved that he came back to the Vikes for a little bit. I loved that he nabbed Favre's 500th touchdown.
Right.
I recently saw a quote from Favre where he was talking about Moss in that 500th touchdown. He was like, Moss, they were in the huddle, and Moss is just like, throw it up at me. Even if I'm not open, he goes, I'll come down with it. And Favre's like, he goes, and I did, and he did. And he goes, I'd seen it done for so many years. He goes, and I finally was able to do that. And I thought that was pretty cool that he was like, oh, cool, I was able to throw a touchdown to Randy Moss. Arguably one of the best quarterbacks of all time is fanboying, fanboying on Moss hardcore.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a cool. A cool quote by Favre, but
he was that kind of receiver though. When he was out in the flat, and even if he's double, triple covered, a lot of quarterbacks will just huck it down there, just throw it in that general direction. Moss is going to get it.
The timing of his jump.
Yep.
No, it's So awesome. That was a solid 4. It's been a fun conversation with you announcers. Just letting the podcast listeners know, remember these episodes will be coming out every Wednesday, hopefully by noon. We'll see how that goes. This is before I'm actually trying to put them out, so that might change. But it's going to be up on Wednesdays. But awesome. Well, thanks, Stephen. I appreciate you coming in and hopefully get your voice on a few more of these podcasts in the future.
I look forward to it.
Awesome. Thanks, my man.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, and that was the end of the preview to the K95.3 Sports Show podcast, and from the 4 announcers. And if you like it, remember, please subscribe. And if you want to have your input added in, and maybe I'll announce some of these additions as shows go on throughout this NFL season, put in the comments who your Mount Rushmore of Viking players are, and we'll go from there. Let's have a conversation about it. Thanks, guys, and please continue listening, and we'll see you next week.